As we work on getting better at our drawing craft, we all have other artists that we look up to and hope to learn from. One of the legends that anyone interested in drawing the figure and inventing things from imagination should be aware of, someone who certainly has had a big influence on my own understanding of how drawing actually works, is the master instructor Glenn Vilppu. In this video, I want to take one of his methods on how to get a drawing started and demonstrate what this can look like in action. Before I start the demonstration, I would love it if you could support this video by giving it a thumbs up. Like this other artist like you can find it in the algorithm too. Also, if you're at a place where you're ready to step up your own drawing skill set, subscribe because this channel is all about giving artists the tools to finally master drawing so they can enjoy the freedom that comes with that. I've been helping artists to do just that over the last 12 years in fancy art schools, at art colleges, and my own online studio, and I would love it if you became part of my community too. All right, without further ado, let's get into this demonstration. The method I want to share focuses on using spherical forms to build whatever it is you're drawing, and I will demonstrate this to you in two phases. First, I'll show you how to use this method by drawing from observation, so from these images, and once we've wrapped our heads around this, we'll then proceed to implementing this when we try to draw from imagination. So the main idea of this methodology is that instead of jumping straight into the more complicated elements of our subject matter, we construct that drawing in layers and phases. And here you're seeing me establish the first phase of the drawing, which is just the linear approach to the pose that I'm seeing. So I'm just using rhythms and lines of action to capture what I'm seeing. And the method I want to demonstrate to you is how to then build on top of this. So once I have my linear gesture, my second phase is to add a bunch of spherical forms as stand-ins for all the different body portions. So here you're seeing me use kind of this oval spherical form for the rib cage, and then I'm connecting that to another oval spherical form for the pelvis area. And I'm linking them up in a way that describes what the torso is up to. And not only can we use this for the torso, but we can use these spherical stand-ins for any other body part. And the cool thing is that like that, we can start to inch our way toward a fuller representation of our subject matter instead of having to go from a simple linear gesture straight to the more complex version of the drawing. So we're going from very simple, just lines, to slightly less simple via these spherical forms. And when I say spherical forms, it just really means ovals or blobs that are these simplified stand-ins for the thigh, the knee, or the lower leg. And as you might already be able to tell, I am giving each body segment its own spherical form. Now, when I draw my ovals on the page, I don't make them heavy-handed. Instead, I think of them as brackets, where I touch down darker on the outer edges of my oval and leave other sections of the oval almost just ghosted in. Now, why would I do that? Because it's just a stepping stone that gets me closer towards the end result of my drawing. And I only need certain segments of this oval in my finished drawing, not the entire circle or the entire oval. And you'll see this as the drawing plays out further. Now, to fully benefit from this method, I have to let go of the idea that this drawing needs to look like the perfect person at this point. I have to fully lean into the idea that I am using stand-ins that will get refined later on in the drawing, because I know that a human's neck isn't a perfect oval, and I know that a human's head doesn't look like a perfect oval, or that the arm, for that matter, it doesn't look as simplified as I'm drawing it right now. It's easy to get derailed by our inner critic at this stage that tells us things like, well, this is not what a human looks like, and obviously it's not, right? Like, this looks very lumpy, very sausage-like, and this is not what the drawing is going to remain like. Of course, I'm going to keep adding to it, and I'm going to start adjusting these super simple ovals into more specific, more characteristic shapes, right? It's similar to when you work with clay. You have to start with a lumpy lump to get the sculpture going, and you keep refining it as you go. It's literally impossible to go from one big blob to a perfect sculpture. You have to work your way up to it in phases, and we are doing the same thing via this drawing method of using ovals and blobs that we link together. Now, the other thing that's so great about this method is that it's a fantastic way of establishing a sense of volume in a spatial relationship, because you can think about the overlaps. How do the body forms physically overlap each other? Or another way to think about this is, how do they sit in front of each other or behind each other? So here I'm thinking about this thigh. How is it connecting, intersecting, sitting in front of the oval that I already have established for the hip? And how does the knee sit in front of or connect with that thigh and the calf? So by reducing everything down to these ovals, you can effectively address and translate what is happening with these forms in space, not by getting complicated, but by really just easily overlapping a couple of ovals with each other. And then, as I said earlier, you can take these interlinked ovals and start to refine these shapes and start to straighten out a couple of areas where you have more bony sections. You can start to imply some of the anatomy more and just take it to the next level of the drawing phase. Let's take a look at another pose. Here you see me zooming through the linear gesture phase. If you want help with that, I'm going to link a video on the top right if you need some help with your linear gestures. So here is the foundation of the pose. And now let's add the next layer. You know, I was talking about approaching a drawing in different phases rather than trying to tackle everything all at once. And once I have captured how long the arms will be, what angle they will have, where the ribcage will be, etc., in its most simplistic version, I then add on to this. So check out what I'm doing. I'm looking at the ribcage. Where is that sitting? And to do that, I'm pretending like I can see through this figure, as if I could take the arm off, as if I could take the breasts off, as if I could see through the body as if it was made out of glass. And how is this rib cage then connecting with the pelvis region? So here, this is really what I'm thinking about, and this is called the bean exercise. I will link another video that will help you understand that a little bit better too, but I like these very simplistic versions of the torso to get a very clear and actually true representation of what is happening, instead of getting lost in the details that we think we should be capturing, like the leotard, the wrinkles, etc. I'm looking beyond all of that, and I'm just looking at the big simplified forms, and I capture how they interlink with each other. Which one is sitting on top of the other? And so the nice thing about a pose like this, which is kind of a complex pose, where you have certain body parts obstructing other body parts, now you have a method that will help you navigate these poses. Instead of just drawing, let's say, the outlines of the body portions that are visible, you can actually go ahead and now construct the body parts that are obstructed. And you'll see that later when I draw the upper arm or that back leg. I'm going to draw as if I can see through to the other side. So here you see me thinking about, where is the upper arm and how does that sit behind the rib cage? And how does that link up with the lower arm? Now, which portion sits in front of which? This here is overlapping that here. So that little move there, it's called a T-intersection, builds instant spatial relationship and therefore a three-dimensional reality. And the nice thing about having this spherical form phase is that you can use it for the big forms like the rib cage and the pelvis, but you can also use it for the smaller forms like the hands. So in that case, every section of the hand gets a little oval. The wrist, the back of the hand, the area where the thumb is growing out of, the fingers grouped together. So it works for both the bigger forms and the more smaller, more intricate forms as well. Like here, you see me do the same thing with the lower leg and the foot. It looks super lumpy, super simple right now, but it gave me a way to figure out what the certain sections are. There's the calf, the lower ankle area, and then that goes on top of the foot, and then there's the toe section over here. And now that I have these kind of blobby attempts at it, I can make it more pretty looking. And then, as I said earlier, we can just build on it later on with more detail, with more line variation, with more contour variation, to bring this from the sausage link person look to a more refined humanoid looking drawing. So let me show you how this method is really powerful when you're dealing with poses that have some awkward elements in them. So if you look at this gorgeous pose right here, everything looks fine until you get to the arm. And the arm will trip us up because we're dealing with foreshortening here. It's coming directly at us. It is in a very unusual position. And usually when we're dealing with something like that, our brain shuts down and we just want to go to outlining it, and then we get frustrated because it doesn't look right. So I'm going through the same method that I have been explaining so far for the rest of the body, right? You see all my beautiful ovals. And then when I get to that arm, I treat it in exactly the same way. I stop thinking that this is an arm and I start thinking, what are the segments and how do these segments overlap? I highly recommend you get yourself one of these mannequins and position it into the pose that you have in your image, because like that it'll become much easier to see the sections and how they actually relate to each other. See, here I have my upper arm section like so, then that gets overlapped by the lower arm section like this, and then the hand sits in front of it like this. So all the different angles are clear because I'm only thinking about little wooden segments, not the daunting thought of an entire arm. And then once I have that simple version, I just work right over it with touching down on the sections of the contour that I need. I vary my line quality, I add some more details, and I'm in a good place. And I start simple, not complex, right? And that is really the discipline here, learning to see past the details, past the surface stuff, and getting to the underlying structure and getting that established first so we can then work on top of a really solid foundation. So get yourself one of these mannequins and use them as a helper tool so you can get to a better drawing end result. Now, the amazing thing is that this isn't just for the figure, this is for literally anything. So if I have a dog and I want to draw that and I'm a little bit unsure on how to begin, here's how you would go through that process. You begin with your linear gesture, just as always, and then you start deconstructing your dog into the different sections. And rather than thinking about the anatomy and all the details, you just think about the sections as ovoids or spherical forms and how they sit in front of each other and how they overlap each other. And just like with the figure, I don't draw the whole oval if I want to have a pretty drawing in the end. I just draw certain sections of those ovals and I pay attention to how these sections overlap each other. So learn how to handle your pencil in a way that allows you to touch down dark on certain parts of your ovals and lighter on other parts of your oval, and like that you have an actual good looking drawing that isn't just all dark circles tangling each other up. Now let's take this to the next level. How can you use this method and get better at drawing from imagination? What I want you to practice first is simply linking two spheres with each other in a way that describes which sphere is in front of the other. So notice here, this one is clearly in front of that one, and I translate that with that T intersection of where those two circles meet. Once you have that, you can start to make those circles behave in a certain way, where one is angling one way and the other one is angling another way. And you can then play with adding more links, more sausage links, if you will, and stack them up. So here I have now 4 ovals stacked up with each other. And before you know it, it'll start looking like a torso and a leg linking up with each other. Now, as I was linking up my spheres, I was being very clear about which side is stretched out, which side is compressed, which one is in front of the other, and this is why it works. It's all in the simplicity. So now I can build onto this and say, well, behind it is another oval and another smaller one and yet another one with a different direction, and I am growing that into another leg. Now, the important part is that I memorized how many sections there are. So I have an upper thigh section, I have a knee section, and then I have the upper calf section and kind of the lower leg, which is kind of where the ankle is. So once I have accounted for them, then I can go from this very simple ovoid stage and make it a little bit more specific, a little bit more characteristic looking as to what a lower leg actually looks like. But see, the genius of this is that all I have to do is link up ovals. We all can do this, right? Everybody can draw some ovals and link them together. I don't have to have the pressure of, oh, I have to invent a leg from imagination. No, I just have to link a couple of ovals together. Now, of course, the more realistic you want your drawing to be, the more you'll eventually have to study anatomy, and you'll have to understand what kind of shapes are in the ankle area, let's say, or in the toe area. What are characteristic shapes for that? And you will layer those over these more simplistic ovals. But again, this oval method, this spherical form method, is a starting place, a jumping off place that you can start confidently and can start with a strong foundation. Now here, I am just inventing some really strange shapes. There's no agenda of needing to make it look like a person. The only thing that I am being clear about in this moment is thinking about which section, which oval link is sitting in front of which. So I make that T intersection here clear again. And I want you to play around with these things. Don't put the pressure on them that they need to look like something. Just see how long can you string ovals together, what comes out of them, and sometimes you can spin them into fantastical creatures. And if you do want to invent a figure from imagination, here's how you would begin. I like clarifying the torso first. What is my ribcage up to? What is my pelvis doing? Which side of the torso is feeling a stretch? So in this case on the right side. Which side of the torso is feeling compression? So here would be the left side. And then how do the other limbs, the other body sections grow out of this torso? And again, I'm not burdening myself with the thought of, oh, a neck and a head and an arm. I am simply placing these oval shapes, these spherical forms, in the angle and direction that I think would be interesting. So you kind of want to start with a visual of what the pose will be like in your mind's eye first before you start the drawing, rather than just randomly stringing ovals together without having a plan of where these ovals are going to go. So see it in your mind's eye first, then place the spherical forms along that arrangement. And you see how simple I begin, literally just elongated ovals, short spheres, stringing them together in a way where it feels like, yeah, this could be an arm if I keep working on it. Take the pressure off at this point that they need to look anatomically correct. At this point, it's just about the proportions, like is this an accurate length and is this a feasible positioning? So as you're seeing it in your mind's eye, as you're placing the marks down on the page, see how the forms behave in their simplest version, see if this is feasible, and then you can go from there. Again, the goal of this method is to get started with something workable and then elaborate on it later with another pass. So this would be the third pass then, where you start to add the anatomical detail. So let's say I invent this from imagination and then I hit a certain wall. This would be the clue that I need to pause here, get a model to take this position, or look up in my anatomy books and find out some more detailed information so I can elaborate on this pose. So there you have it. If you enjoy practicing these very targeted methodologies and you want more, and you like the idea of having a mentor guiding you through the learning process, you may be interested in my online mentoring program. I put a link in the description box below this video where you can find out more. And I look forward to seeing you next week again. Take care.